Have you ever had an experience of being with someone that you care about? Maybe even somebody you feel like you fully trust. And when things finally become intimate, your body suddenly changes. You might find yourself becoming more stuck, more still. You might feel numb or like you're not fully inside of the experience or in your body anymore. And then after, you're wondering, what happened? Why do I freeze during sex? Why do I shut down during intimacy? Why does my body do this even when I'm part of a safe relationship? Hi, my name is Ceasar, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. And on this channel, I talk all about the unprotected child, which includes attachment trauma, child sexual abuse, mother-daughter sexual abuse, and how what happened to you during your childhood often plays a part in what happens in your adult life, why these patterns keep showing up, and what you can then do about it. I'm all about helping women feel empowered over here. So today, I want to talk about something that many survivors of child sexual abuse experience, but often don't really understand, which is why the body freezes or shuts down during sex. This is something I see often with the women that I work with in my practice centering healing. And if this happens to you, the first thing I want you to know is to understand that your body is often responding to a familiar pattern that shows up when certain parts are activated or triggered that first began when you were younger. But we're going to kind of start off with like why this makes so much sense, because in the moment you're thinking this makes no sense. So when we talk about freezing during sex, we have to start with the childhood and with development. It's where it always starts. A child does not experience abuse with the same brain, the same body, the same language, or the power that we as adults have. I mean, after all, they're smaller and developmentally, they're less advanced than we are. So when we are in our mother's wombs, our brain begins to organize and develop, and the development, it moves from the bottom to the top. The brainstem, the diencephalon, they all come online at first. These are the systems responsible for breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, temperature control, metabolism, basically the things that keep the body itself alive. And that starts in utero and of course develops throughout the first year of life. Then we have our limbic system. It begins, developing, basically coming online right after birth, and it governs emotions and our attachment system, which I like to call like the connection system, right? All of that begins to organize. It's most strong during the first 5 years, and it's interconnected with the brainstem. The cortex, it's our big old thinking brain, and it develops on top of these earlier systems, but it takes a lot longer for it to develop. And this matters because when child sexual abuse happens, especially when we're so young, the experience is not stored in our cortex in the same way like as we're adults. It actually stores more in our body through our sensations and through our attachment and our survival responses. So the brainstem and the limbic system, they register a threat. The stress response system, the fight, flight, freeze, it activates. Hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol prepare the body to respond to the threat, to the danger. And the autonomic nervous system begins shifting between different survival responses depending on what the body perceives as possible. So it's not here. This part, the cortex, shut down. It's all the limbic, it's all the brainstem. So the experiences then become encoded through these physiological responses, emotional signals, and survival adaptations way before there's a coherent narrative of the thinking brain. And this is why many survivors later come in with body memories, tension, numbness, disconnection, very strong reactions, especially in intimacy, that really feel like they happen without their control. It's automatic. And so they don't really always understand why, and it's very, very confusing and can mess with the relationship, which is why people come and they want help with it because they're like, what's going on here? And so this is where I like to kind of focus in on the attachment template and what I call the unprotected child. And what happens here is that the attachment template is the relational blueprint that our nervous system is built upon when we're growing up. Those early connections like I kind of talked about briefly before. And it tells our body what closeness feels like. It tells us what we expect from other people. It tells our nervous system how safe or unsafe proximity, touch, attention, and intimacy might be. The attachment template forms through the thousands of early experiences that we have during our childhood with our parents and the other adults around us whose job it is to protect us. The nervous system is constantly gathering information about what happens when you move towards someone, when you move away from someone, and what happens when somebody moves towards you, when you ask for comfort or when your body needs protection. For someone who grew up unprotected as a child, intimacy and danger sometimes become tangled together, because when you have safe and connected touch, you should feel warm, you should feel at ease and loose, like you want to move towards that. But with dangerous touch, you feel intruded upon, you feel scared, you might feel cold. It's a very different experience. And what often happens in abusive situations is that there's moments where you have the safe touch, and then there's moments where you have the unsafe touch. And your body's kind of trying to figure out when that is going to happen. And you don't always know. And so you start to become vigilant or sensitized to when is the thing going to come? When is the harm going to come to me? And so and especially if it happens with a parent, right? The parent is your abuser. They're the one who simultaneously provides you with warm and safe love, touch, affection. But in the next moment, they can switch on you and it becomes very dangerous, very intrusive, very scary. And so it makes sense that those two signals become kind of interwoven together. Moreover, with these type of dynamics, the nervous system kind of learns that closeness could mean losing control over your body and what happens to you. Like, it's not really up to you. It's up to what the person decides to do. And so this learning stays inside the attachment template. So later in life, when intimacy begins with a partner, your nervous system sometimes recognizes pieces of those earlier experiences, and your partner moves closer and your body is being touched, or someone is watching you closely, and there's this sense that in this moment the continuation of the abuse is happening, and the nervous system notices those cues and activates the same survival responses that helped you endure earlier situations. And this is where you become frozen or stuck. And the freeze response appears again because the nervous system is following this earlier blueprint that it learned during childhood. Another piece of this has to do with how the body stores traumatic experiences. The younger someone was when the abuse happened, the more memories tend to live in the body. Young children store experiences through sensations and physiology more than through narrative memory. The cortex, which organizes experiences into stories and language, is still developing during childhood. The limbic system and the brainstem are doing most of the processing. It's why you kind of drop back down when you are activated or triggered. That means that the body remembers the experiences through physiological responses, muscle tension, sensory signals, autonomic nervous system activation. And this is why sensory cues can be so powerful later in life and cause the conditioned response of freeze to come back on in the moment, even when you're with a safe partner. Touch, smell, tone of voice, body positioning, certain words, certain kinds of physical touch, proximity, all of these things can activate the nervous system before a thought even appears in your mind, before the cortex even comes on, right? That's all we're talking about here. Many of the women I work with describe this very clearly once we begin talking about it. And they might say stuff like, well, my mind suddenly just went blank. I feel like I just disappeared. I went numb. I disconnected. My body locks up. I know I'm safe and I'm excited and I'm happy going into it, but then suddenly I don't feel so safe. And these are all nervous system responses starting to activate through the body's memory system. And the body recognizes a sensory pattern before the thinking brain has time to analyze it. And basically it's just doing its job. That is what our stress response is supposed to do. So it's actually doing our job. It's just overcorrecting, causing us problems later in life. Child sexual abuse often happens in situations where a child has very little actual power. The person may be an older child or an adolescent. They may be an adult, which means that they are bigger, stronger. They're basically in a position of authority, or they're somebody that a child depends on. So even though the child has an instinct to protest or resist or to move away, that instinct is limited by what is actually possible. And it's very important for you to know that, to decrease the shame and the blame that you might feel like, why didn't I do more? Some children do try to say no, some try to move away, some push a hand away, they turn their head away, they go quiet, or they try to make themselves smaller. These are all signs that the nervous system is trying to protect itself, right? These are actual signs of fleeing and fighting, if we actually want to use the stress response system language. So a fight response, like I named before, often involves pushing away, protesting, or resisting. You're trying to overpower your way out. What's most common for younger kids or for smaller beings is the flee response, which is trying to just get away, trying to escape, and attempting to create distance. And these responses are actually coordinated through the activation of the sympathetic nervous system, which prepares the body for activation by increasing heart rate, directing blood flow to muscles, and increasing alertness, which is why you feel a certain way when you're triggered. You start to actually feel those things. But when those responses don't actually stop the abuse, or when they lead to more fear or more pressure or more force or more danger, the nervous system learns something very quickly, which is like, that's just not going to work. And so it does the freeze. It goes, oh, like we can't get away. We got to shut it down. So it starts to shut it down. But the energy that's still in the system is still present. It's just now trapped. And that's what you have with the freeze response. And so the freeze occurs when the nervous system detects that neither fighting or escaping will increase safety, and the autonomic nervous system shifts toward immobilization in order to conserve energy and reduce harm. Movement decreases, muscle tone changes, the body becomes still. All of these things that we named before happen during intimacy. And breathing may become shallow or restricted. Sensations may become more dim or disappear. And as a child, when you experience this, you may have felt detached from your body or from the moment itself. And that's the same feeling you might be feeling when you're with your safe partner engaging in intimate relations. And from a neurobiological perspective, this response involves coordination between the sympathetic nervous system and the dorsal vagal branch of the parasympathetic nervous system. And the body is simultaneously holding tension while suppressing movement. I mean, talk about exhausting, right? That is energetically exhausting, which is why you might feel exhausted a lot of the time, because it's constantly being activated and this is constantly happening. But this allows you as a child to endure what is happening when active protection is not really possible. And the learning becomes stored within the nervous system. And because the nervous system learns through repetition and survival relevance, it may continue activating the same responses here in adulthood, even when you know in your cortex you are safe. But when you're activated, that goes bye-bye and it's dropped down to the lower systems. We've got our conditioned responses. The impact on your relationship, right? So this pattern often creates a lot of stress and distress within the relationship. The person freezing may feel guilt or shame. They may worry that something is wrong with them, or that they worry that they're disappointing their partner, or that somehow they're failing at intimacy. Conversely, your partner may feel confused or worried that they're doing something wrong. Sometimes both people start kind of blaming themselves. Partner may deeply care about each other. You want closeness, you want connection, you want intimacy, but your nervous system is still responding in a certain way, and it's creating a lot of tension around the intimacy because the body is reacting to an earlier survival map. So understanding what your body is doing helps remove a lot of the confusion. And when people start to understand the nervous system response, the conversation shifts from blame to curiosity. So where you can start working with this is actually not in the intimacy. You want to start with everyday situations where the stakes are a lot lower. So something I work with regularly with women in my practice is the goal is to start to begin to notice early signs that your nervous system is starting to freeze. You're starting to shut down. So you might notice your body becoming very still, or your mind going blank, or your muscles tightening, your breathing becoming shallow, your voice becoming more quiet, a feeling of distance or disconnection from your body. Those are some early signs that your body is starting to freeze up. And so practicing awareness in ordinary moments helps you recognize the pattern early. So then when that starts to happen, when you start to notice those early signals, you can help the nervous system reconnect to the present moment. And this is when we start doing what we call an orienting exercise. So orienting just means you're engaging with your senses to remind your brain where you are right now. And that's the 5 senses. And again, that's completely connected to the brainstem. And so you want to look around your room or your space or your environment and notice 5 things that you see. 5 things that you see, 5 things that you can smell, 5 things you can hear. Taste can be a little bit funny, so I don't usually use a number with that. And 5 things you can touch, right? So you're engaging with your 5 senses. You can also move your body around. Start with gross motor, so you're talking about your arms, your legs, hands, feet. Tend to stay away from the core because that tends to be really activating. But when you move, when you just actively tell your body to move, it jump starts things and you're interrupting that cycle. And when you do that, the nervous system starts to begin to recognize that the present environment is different from an earlier environment. And so you want to do that in those moments of practice, not in the intimacy. And then when you start to notice, you can bring that in to the intimate moments, and you can have conversations prior with your partner about what you're noticing and what might work. And a lot of this is trial and error, but you'll have an idea going in about what works for you and what doesn't. And this is where the communication between you and your partner become really, really important. And you should be moving really slow and letting your partner know what helps you feel safe, giving them direction about pacing and touch. And the women that I work with find that when their partner responds to these signals with patience and care, and their nervous system begins updating these expectations, and the body begins to learn that intimacy can include safety, choice, and respect. And so another part I really want to highlight that I think is even more important is assessing the safety of your relationship. Most of the time we think about big issues like verbal abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, things like that. Your body's not going to be able to settle into any type of intimacy if that's going on. But I also want to talk more about maybe some of the more subtle things that happen in relationships that actually can make you feel unsafe. And so you might feel like, oh, I have the most wonderful partner. Like this happens all the time when I'm with the women I work with, right? They're like, oh, my partner's so wonderful. You know, he listens to me, or she, you know, brings me flowers or whatever it is. But when we kind of dive deeper, what we recognize is that sometimes your partner doesn't actually respond to the concerns that you have in a way that makes you feel heard or witnessed or listened to. And so if that is happening, then it's very hard for you to feel safe because you're like, but when I bring things up, they don't really listen, or, you know, nothing really changes. That will make you feel unsafe. And that can also be a block in your intimacy. So you want to check for those things too. Like, how is it when you communicate with your partner? Are you listened to and are you respected? And so the final thing I want to say is that these patterns really can change. The nervous system learned through these repeated experiences early in life, and it can learn new patterns through new experiences here in the present, through safety and support. I see this regularly with the women I work with, so I know it's possible for you too. If this topic really resonates and you want to learn more, I definitely talk about it in my book, Reclaim Your Power. It's a nervous system guide for adult women who grew up unprotected. But if you want to work with me more directly and you live in California or Florida, all that information is in the description box. And so again, I hope this video was helpful. I'm trying to jump back into YouTube and shoot more videos. So let me know down below how this video went for you. If you have any comments, any thoughts, share your thoughts and ideas. I'd love to hear from you all. And with that, I hope you have a good rest of your day and take care of yourselves.